Welcome to my channel Brainies. Today we are going to discuss about the topic ASIA scale. ASIA's impairment scale. The American Spinal Injury Association impairment scale. It is a standardized neurological examination which is used to assess the sensory and motor levels which were affected by the spinal cord injury. Basically, it has 5 classification levels ranging from complete loss of neurological function in the affected area to completely normal. Let us just see the various elements of the scale according to National Institutes of Health, which is as follows. Grade A, which indicates complete, that is, no sensory or motor function is preserved in the sacral segments S4, S5. Grade B indicates incomplete, that is sensory, but no motor function is preserved below the neurological level and includes the sacral segments S4, S5. Grade C. Grade C indicates incomplete. Motor function is preserved below the neurological level, but however it is more than half of the key muscles below the neurological level have a grade of less than muscle grade 3. The next grade is grade D, which indicates incomplete. Here also the motor function is preserved below the neurological level, but more than half of the key muscles below the neurological level have a grade of greater than the muscle grade 3 or even more. The next grade is grade E, which indicates completely normal. If sensation and motor function, if it is tested with the International Standard Neurological Classification of Spinal Cord Injury, it has been graded as normal in all the segments. So this is a scale. Let us just discuss this scale in detail. So how to just classify and how to make the scoring. So this is the motor scoring and this is the sensory scale. So while calculating the motor scores, we have to calculate the upper extremity and lower extremity, both right side and left side. For calculating the motor scores, we can calculate the upper extremity for elbow flexors, wrist extensors, elbow extensors, finger flexors and finger abductors. That is C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. This motor scores can be calculated, can be assessed using the MRC grading level, that is the manual muscle testing. How do we usually calculate the power? So it is 0 indicates no contraction and 1 is minimum visible perceptible contraction. 1 indicates the active range of motion in gravity eliminated position. 3 indicates active range of motion against gravity. 4 indicates active range of movement against resistance with maximal resistance and minimal resistance. So this is the 5 grade. So that is being scored here for C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. This is for upper extremity. So the maximum scoring for each is 5. So it becomes 5 into 5 is equal to 25. So when we calculate it for the lower extremity, similarly, it can be calculated for hip flexors, knee extensors, ankle dorsiflexors, grade 2 extensors and ankle plantar flexors. That is L2, L3, L4, L5 and S1. So here again we are just going to calculate based on the MRC grading. So it becomes 5 into 5 if it is going to be the maximum score. So it comes to around 25 here and again 25 here in the upper extremity 25, lower extremity 25. So the total score becomes, the maximum motor score will be 50. So this is for the right side. Similarly, we can calculate it for the left side. The motor subscores which has been indicated here. Similarly, it can be calculated for the left side. So now we are just moving on to the next session, that is the sensory assessment. So sensory assessment can be assessed by light touch and pinprick. So this light touch and pinprick can be assessed at the various dermatomal levels C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, C8, T1, T2, T3, T4, T5, T6, T7, T8, T9, T10, T11, T12, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. You can see this dermatomal level in this diagram which has been indicated, the various levels. So light touch, similarly we'll be assessing for pinprick. So how to score this light touch and pinprick is, that has been given here. So if there is no response, no sensation, it has been marked as absent, which indicates the scoring 0. If the sensation is altered, it has been indicated as 1. If the sensation is very much normal, then it has been indicated by the score 2. So if the person's scoring is going to be perfect in C2, then we will mark it as 2, the maximum scoring. So similarly, when we calculate the motor scoring for all, sensory scoring for everything, so totally it comes to 28 dermatomal level. So 28 into maximum of 2, it becomes 56. Similarly, we will calculate it for the pinprick. So 28 levels into the maximum of 2, it becomes 56. So these are the maximum range. However it is, we will calculate it for the patient, what is their scoring level. So this is the right side light touch and right side pinprick. Similarly, we will just check the sensation of light touch and pinprick on the left side. So the total score, similarly here it is 56 plus 56, it comes to around 112. So how do we just calculate the total level? How do we calculate the total level? When we calculate the total level of the motor subscores, it becomes, when we are just calculating the right side and left side of upper extremity alone, it becomes upper extremity right plus upper extremity left. That is right side upper extremity and left side upper extremity. So here it is maximum, it is 25 here, and again here it is maximum is 25. So 25 plus 25, it is 50, out of which how much the patient scores. So this is the upper extremity motor scoring, the total. Out of 50, what is the patient scoring? That's what we calculate. The next one is the, similarly for upper extremity, we have calculated the motor subscores. Similarly, we have to calculate the lower extremity. So lower extremity right side motor scoring, that is these 5 levels, L2, L3, L4, L5, S1. And lower extremity on the left side motor scoring, L2, L3, L4, L5, S1. So it becomes 25 plus 25. It is total as 50. Out of this 50, what is the patient scoring? That's what we are just going to calculate it. So that's it with the motor subscoring. Then we are just shifting on to the sensory subscoring. So sensory subscoring is first is the light touch and pinprick on the right side, and similarly the light touch and pinprick on the left side. So to make it simplified, we just calculate the light touch on the right side plus we calculate the light touch on the left side. So the scoring maximum is 56 plus 56, out of which, out of 112, what is the patient scoring for light touch sensation alone? Then we calculate the pinprick sensation of the right side and left side. So the total scoring is 56 plus 56 is equal to 112, out of which what is the patient scoring for the pinprick sensation? After calculating all these things, we just calculated and put it in the box for sensory and motor subscores. Based on these scores, we just allot and figure it out the neurological level of injury. Let me just tell you what is the neurological level of injury. After calculating the motor and sensory levels, the neurological level of injury can be calculated. That is the sensory and motor scores, we make it as a point here. So after calculating, the highest level of motor and sensory level is being calculated as the neurological level of injury. What is complete or incomplete injury? If VAC is present, that is the voluntary anal contraction is not present, and S4, S5 sensory score is 0, and DAP is also absent, that is deep anal pressure, then injury is complete. That is, VAC is absent, S4, S5 sensory score is 0, so motor is also 0, sensory is also 0, deep anal pressure is absent. So if everything is absent at 0, then we calculate, we mark it as injury is complete. otherwise the injury is incomplete. This is what we mentioned here as complete or incomplete. Then we'll just move on to the next session, that is the Asia's impairment scale. So which I just told you in the 5 grades. So we have to mention which grade it is. A, B, C, D, E. The next level is zone of partial preservation. So I'll tell you what is the zone of partial preservation. Before going into the ZPP, that is zone of partial preservation, let us just see the steps in classification of this. That is nothing but determine the sensory levels of right and left side, as I told you now, and determine the motor levels of the right and left side. Next, determine the neurological levels of injury. Then find out whether the injury is complete or incomplete. Then determine the Asia's impairment scale of grading. Then determine the zone of partial preservation. That's what I was explaining so long. So it is sensory and motor scores, then the neurological level of injury, complete or incomplete, Asia scale grading, then ZPP, that is zone of partial preservation. So we'll move on to the next one. So let me just give you a quick review of what is ZPP, that is zone of partial preservation. It is only used in case of injuries where the motor grading is absent, that is no voluntary anal contraction and no sensory function, that is no deep anal pressure, no light touch, no pinprick. Everything is absent in the lowest sacral segments S4, S5. And if it refers to the dermatomes and myotomes caudal to the sensory and motor levels that remain partially innervated, so that is called as zone of partial preservation. That is absent motor, absent sensory and caudal to the dermatomes and myotomes caudal to the sensory and motor level, it remains partially innervated. With sacral sparing of this sensory function, the sensory zone of partial preservation is not applicable, then in that case you mention it as not applicable. If VAC is present and motor ZPP is not applicable, then we note it as not applicable NE. So that's it with zone of partial preservation, and that's it with the Asia's scale. With this, easily we can just find out the level of injury in the spinal cord level. So that's it with this Asia scale. Meet you in next video. Thanks for watching. Kindly support by subscribing and sharing. Thank you once again.